Sound, camera, action with inspiring leaders. Today's guest does not need any introduction. A renowned figure in the education world, Mr. Lachlan McKinnon, Director General of Emirates National Schools, brings over 30 years of experience across Australia, the UK, the Middle East, Africa, and Singapore. In this episode, we unpack the UAE inspection framework. What do inspectors look when they walk into your classroom? Leadership practices, school environment, and what truly makes a school stand out. Mr. Lachlan, thank you so much for joining us.
Great introduction. You smashed it. You had all the pieces in there.
As I often say, I have learned so much from you. Your leadership and coaching have had a huge impact in my career. And, I will say many others would say the same about you. That leads me to my first question.
Sure.
How do you intentionally create such a positive, supportive environment? And how important do you believe this is in, creating a kind of a successful school culture?
Well, I think, the first step is understanding that people are our greatest asset. So if we get our people right, we get our culture right. And there's a great line that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Right? So for me, if I can get the people on board with our common purpose, what we believe and how we believe it, then we can raise above wherever we are at that point in time. So you've heard probably the big words around psychological safety and things like that in meetings, and that is in itself, it's been bandied a lot recently, but it is true. It's about setting environments where people feel comfortable, they're recognised, they're given the opportunity to succeed, but held accountable too. So it's important to understand that in the rooms that you set up this environment, or schools you set up this environment, there is still accountability. And you still have to have fierce conversations, let's put it that way, in terms of making us rise, because that's why we're there in those schools, is to try and lift that. But building a culture takes time, it takes a lot of energy, especially in a systems type schools. In a single school, I now know it's a bit easier. In a system schools, it takes a lot longer, but you've got to have buy-in from your people. And that means, and part of that is about presence. And I think you'll remember me being around the school a fair bit. I'll get my 10,000 steps in pretty much most days. Yeah, I don't get it here so much. I tend to get it in the car driving from school to school, but maybe not the steps. But to me, and even, as the principal, we were out in the car park. We were out, and good principals still do this. They're at the front gate when people walk in. They're at the back gate when people walk out the side. They're running instructional leadership programs in the schools so that people can see that they're participating and being part of it. So that's all been part of their presence. And when you start to build that, people start to trust. And then when you've got trust, people start also to follow. Because when you have the bad days, and we all have bad days, where sometimes we make bad decisions. Well, not bad, but maybe not so great decisions. People are forgiving because they know that's not who you might be.
Exactly.
So although they'll give you more space to continue with that decision that they may not like at that point, because they understand that where your vision is and that you've got the same purpose, which I think is important. So, at the moment, for example, for me on the bigger system schools, my first term here, I just spent the whole term on my listening tour. And I went and met every single senior leader, middle leader, operational staff, one-to-one in every school. Took a while. But it was important for them. And they've never had it before. They've never had a one-to-one conversation with the Director General. So that was hopefully for me connecting with them. And if people could connect with you,
exactly, that's so important.
You'll move them forward. I could talk about that for hours, so I'm just going to be careful how far I go down that rabbit hole.
Okay, so that leads to our next question now.
Sure.
When inspectors walk into the classroom, what are the few things they notice?
Oh, look, it starts really just from basic stuff. Some of it is literally what the classroom looks like. And I think, look, a lot of the time I can only put it from my perspective anyway as well. So there's always different perspectives of what inspectors look for in those classrooms. And now that I've done a few inspector courses and I'm accredited in a number, they're starting to shift their viewpoint, which is great, away from talking about the teacher, but talking about what's actually happening in the lesson, as opposed to the teacher should have. But when you walk into a classroom, it's like when I walk into a school. You feel the school straight away from what it looks like. When you walk into a classroom, just like when I walk into it, I can feel whether I think this school, just from the foyer alone, where the school could be. And it's never perfect. It's not perfect science. Where this probably could be, and if I wanted to scale it out of, weak to outstanding.
And you can feel the energy.
You can feel the energy. This is, mind you, this isn't before you speak to teachers.
Exactly.
This is just the vibe you get from walking in the space. And some school systems and schools do this really well, and I'm envious, to be honest. So you can walk into a classroom, you can feel what's happening in the classroom, even without kids and teachers in the classroom. What's up on the wall, what's the print up on the wall, how clear it is, what the clarity of it is, what's it trying to portray, is the kids' work up there. So there's a lot of stuff you take that in within minutes. That's not where you sit there for half an hour and just keep looking around trying to figure it out. So then there's also kids' dynamics in the classroom, how the classroom's set up. Again, minutes you're talking about. This is not something that you sit, because every school has different ways of, and what we're learning, of delivering education. And, there's some schools that lines in classrooms are the way to do it, and they get great results. So I can't complain about that. Yeah. I shouldn't comment on that as a teacher, as an inspector. I've got to be commenting on the kids' outcomes and what progress they've made in that lesson. So there's some of the sort of physical things that you will look for, and then of course you're looking for progress. The big thing for me is about progress in the classroom. Is the lesson objective, is it, up on the board, is it visible, is it, but again, that's a teaching thing. I don't necessarily have to have that up, as long as I can hear the kids knowing what they're supposed to be learning and where they're going next. And there's conversations that you want to have with children. I'm in a school next week for 3 days. Trying to upskill myself outside my own school. And you know what? I'm still doing it. And, I think about 30 years later and I'm still going into schools to inspect them as a new type of inspector. Mm-hmm. And I like it because it keeps me on the edge of school improvement, because my goal there is always about making sure I can talk the talk when people are in my space and we're talking about school improvement, and I can understand it. There's only so far you can go without it. But what else are they looking for? Attainment, yes, that's a little bit trickier.
That's attainment and progress.
Yeah, but attainment is, you see, the progress is what you see in the classroom. Attainment you will also see in their books. And then there's data that will come with that, or data, depending on which way part of the world you're in.
Does that decide your results, like if they look at attainment? Because I think principals and everywhere, they are so worried about the attainment. What kind of judgment would be based on that? If it's a good lesson, very good lesson. Yeah. So what's the percentage? Okay, let me rephrase this. Not a percentage. What do you think they have to do different for the attainment? Are we talking about the progress during the lesson, or we are talking about the results? So, and it's so much stress around that, and I can see that a lot of schools have inspection. They're all talking about, we are worried about the attainment. Why that stress is around attainment?
Well, look, you know what? It should be more focused on progress. Attainment, yes, you can see from the data. Yeah, and you're looking at longitudinal data anyway. So you're looking at always over 3 years if you can get that data, and then you're looking at trends and analysis from that. Look, our starting point, when we look at some schools, their starting point might be quite low. Their attainment might be quite low. So if you take Cat 4 result, for example, if you've got a school where the average Cat 4 might be, hopefully people understand Cat 4, with an SAS score of say 80, that's really low. And therefore it's difficult to build the attainment, but the progress is what you've got to focus on.
So the progress we need to focus on.
Correct. If that's the one, that's what you see in the class from, according to curriculum standards, is have they obtained the progress? according to the curriculum standards at the point. And of course, yes, your lesson objectives should be aligned with your curriculum standard and those sorts of things. But the lesson hopefully is sequenced enough that gives that opportunity for kids to all have that progress. And of course, some kids will move faster than others, so you've got to think about groups of kids. What sort of groups have you got in the classroom? From your gifted and talented to your students of determination to even your kids in the middle. And there's other kids in that group as well. What sort of teaching and learning is going towards those kids as well to make sure their progress is good. For me, it's looking at progress. Attainment's important, obviously, so you're going to be checking that. But you'll check that you'll triangulate. All of this is triangulation. The classroom is a triangulation of what I read in the data outside. When they give you the CEF, or they give you the student development plan, you're seeing what they say there is actually what's happening in the classroom. And the disconnect is where that actually is the problem. For most schools, that's where it falls a bit, is what is happening in the classroom doesn't always match what's happening in the data that you're reading.
Sure.
Or the story they've talked about. But it's that evidence that comes with that, and that's what you're looking for. So when the inspectors are going around, that's the triangulation, right? You're looking at what's happening in the classroom, here's the data, and there's also conversations you have with school leaders, right? So most lesson observations for inspections will be 20 minutes. You might get one or two where inspectors will do the whole lesson, but you've got 20 minutes to show what is the best in that classroom. So you've got to really think about that when people walk into the classroom. And of course there's always, cheat sheets to do your best, which I won't go into, because I shouldn't, because you should be just doing things normally every day. And you notice I've always said that, right? So when you give me, if I go and watch a lesson and it's a really very good lesson, I want the same lesson every day without me being in the classroom.
I'm going to pick that point really because I believe that the students, teachers, even the management, they stress out for inspection. But if we are doing this every day, we don't have to stress out about it, right? So that's what we believe, the stress around inspection. And I'm telling you, stress comes from top.
Does, absolutely.
And then it goes to teachers and students and the environment. And then when inspectors walk into that school, they can feel the tension.
Yeah.
So what advice would you give it to the leaders around UAE to do the tips, I should say, that they can do to avoid the stress around the school?
Well, it's a hard one in terms of the school leader, because the school leader, if they've not got a balanced view on things anyway, your environment's really going to be stressful most of the time. So, however, you don't want to stress your teachers. You need to give a little bit of stress. Stress is not bad, right?
Stress is not bad.
It's not bad. It's just that how you balance it, and there's got to be a certain amount of stress to get those chemicals running in your body to make sure your peak performance. It's the fight, flight, the approach. So that's not too bad. It's just that when you put too much pressure on. So if you prepare well, but you should be preparing all the time.
I agree with you.
Having said that, schools will, and let's be honest with it, schools will, the week before, and that's why I suppose they're only giving you 5 days now. They used to give like 3 weeks, I think, before the inspection.
Yeah.
Whereas now they give you 5 days, which is not a lot of time to suddenly change from black to white if you were black, or do you know what I mean, in terms of how far you can travel in 5 days is just, you can only show the data and everything else. Showing you pedagogy and everything else in 5 days is going to be pretty hard to do. You can, of course, give teachers, these are things that you really need to think about when someone walks into your classroom, but you should be doing them all the time anyway. So when I walk into a classroom, do I want to see them talk about the lesson objective? Do I want to see them talk about success criteria? Do I want to see them, the kids talking about it actually more than the teacher? Do you want to see, a plenary? Do you want to see an intro? Do you want to see a hook me in? Yeah, of course I do. But that should be happening every day.
Yeah.
Because when I walk into a lesson, do a lesson observation, you might be walking in the middle, so you've missed the intro, the hook in. You might miss the plenary at the end. So it's just that, as you said, the only way to bring that stress level down a bit is just to get your school's teaching and learning up as best you can, because that's the big cornerstone. If we don't get really PS3 or PS1 smashed out, which is achievement, progress and attainment, the rest of it's not going to happen. You'll never get your school very good. because it affects on governance, which
Sure.
is Peer 6,
Sure.
and leadership, and they're the big three, right? So Peers 1, 3, and 6. They're the sort of that's one of my colleagues said the golden triangle. But you've got to get it sorted, right?
What are the common myths schools have about inspection?
What are the common
Myths that
Myths?
schools, yeah.
Oh, I've said myths again.
That
They
school
find it
believes.
painful, I think. I think
That they believe in,
Yeah.
that during inspections.
I'm trying to think. Well, look, some of them have missed the fact that they actually read the ethical framework properly. We have schools that, some schools I've worked at, and you've spoken to them about, okay, you're pitching for very good. So if you do your maths right, and I'm not saying I'm the mathematician, I get smart people to do my job. In fact, you met one earlier. He was my smart Graham. He's my smart person. You've just got to get that data correct and the maths right in terms of if you're pitching for this, you've got to make sure that you have got the right percentages of very good to outstanding, but you just got to make sure you're doing it in that classroom. Because otherwise you can pitch yourself for very good, but if you haven't put across all the parameters at a certain percentage of very good or goods, your set will crash and burn.
Sure.
There's a few schools that miss that. It's a simple thing to miss.